please welcome to the stage, we have the Slate's culture editor, John Swanburg, in conversation with Ralph Macchio.
Oh, man.
So we were in the green room. Did Daniel win? Did he?
We want to know if they finally fixed the ending. Wow, to hear, I just tweeted out that I'm backstage at the 92Y and the best around was playing. I just sent that out. It was very cool, and I felt like you guys took me back to 1984 all over again.
That song really holds up, I think.
It does.
Every time I hear it, I get shivers.
Yeah, I'm expecting you all to work out to it tomorrow morning.
So I watched part of the movie before I went backstage, and I think this is my 404th viewing. And I was curious, do we have other super fans in the house tonight? How many of you guys have dressed up like a shower for Halloween? Can I get a... We got one back there. I've done it. It's a great costume. Girls do love to come and dance inside the shower with you. So I'm exactly the right age, I think, to have seen this movie in theaters, and then I had it on VHS. In fact, it was the only movie I had on VHS, I think, from 87 to 89. And I watched it over and over again, and to the point where I memorized the screenplay, but also my mom memorized the screenplay. And I called her when I found out I was going to get to interview Ralph, and told her, and without missing a beat, she said, please ask him which was harder, wax on, wax off, or paint the fence. So I was going to open with that, because I think my mom actually does want to know that. I appreciate the
I'm going back.
This.
I think, I'm giving you a lot of thought. I think that wax on, wax off was tougher because I'd often have to hit this side of the bone against Mr. Morita's whatever he was either holding or blocking, where the paint the fence was a little more... I got this a little softer here, so I've never. You were worried about asking questions I've heard a million times. Never got that one.
My mom is going to be so excited. All right, let's sort of start at the top. I'm curious to hear you talk about how this came about, how you auditioned for the role, how you found out about it, how you felt when you read the script the first time.
Yeah, I was in New York, and John Avildsen who directed the film, was starting to see actors in New York in his apartment. And John always, even to this day, has a video camera on it. Well, I say on his shoulder because he used to have the big 1980s video camera. And I heard it was called The Karate Kid, and I was like, oh, is that just the cheesiest title? The Karate Kid? It sounded like something my dad would say, but so I went in and I auditioned, and interestingly enough, some of this video of my first audition is available on a YouTube channel. I only put the movies that turn into hits. I show those auditions. But John Avildsen actually put those up. I don't know, you could search for it because it's really kind of interesting to see me as Larusso before Larusso was even Larusso. So I auditioned, and there was a ton of guys out in the hallway, and all joking about the hideousness of the title and how corny it was. And, I always said when I first read the script, I feel like I'm getting a cavity. It's just too sweet, but that's why I'm not a major motion picture executive, because it was a big hit. But big hit. But as soon as I auditioned for John and read those scenes, it was the post-Halloween beating scene, and the meeting the girl, the Alley with an Eye scene, which Alley with an Eye was an ad lib I did at the audition, and has stayed till today. And Avildsen called the next day and said, listen, I can't guarantee you this movie, but we got a lot of hoops to jump through, but if I were you, I'd take some karate. Now, as a young actor, you can't get much better news than that. And the best part about when I walked out of his apartment, I just saw there was like Rocky, and there was all these great films. And I was like, well, I knew I was in the big leagues for the moment. And then, so that was the audition process for me. And then they flew me to LA and still had a screen test and do all that other stuff. And but here we are today.
I encourage everybody to go look up this footage that Ralph mentioned on YouTube. It is amazing to watch you, before the movie existed, reading for this role, because you seem to have already inhabited this character. You seem to be the Daniel that I knew before I watched this footage. So I'm surprised to hear you say that you felt the screenplay at first was maybe a little too sweet, because you also seem to have really embraced the role already. And I'm curious, what point did you realize that this was something more than a lame title, sort of saccharine kids movie? I mean, obviously it grew into something big enough that we filled a room tonight all these decades later. So when did that kind of dawn on you? Was it after the movie was already made, or was it in the process of making it?
That's a great question. First, I just want to allude to, when I read the script, it was the corniness of some of the teenage love story that that felt on the page, on the first reading, a little bit saccharine, but that actually got better. And there was not that fantastic Miyagi drunk scene that came later as we were shooting. They always had a placeholder for that scene. But when I knew, you're asking the question, when I felt that this was more than just an okay script with a kooky title. I think when we were shooting, it was evident that Pat Morita and I had a great chemistry together. He was instantly Miyagi from the moment I met him. Nobody wanted him for the part except John Avildsen, the director. The producer was like, no way am I giving this part to this guy. He's a comic. I want Toshiro Mifune. It should be a real strong, Asian actor, and wrong. But we just hit it off, and so I felt that there was a magical element. Anytime I was on screen with him, because everyone was talking about it on set, and they were talking about it the next day when they would see stuff back. Back in the day, you developed film and you projected it the next morning. But the moment I knew. When I saw the film at the Coronet Theater, I don't know if it's still up there on Third Avenue, and it was I think it was like May 18th, 1984, a month before it came out. It came out on the 22nd of June. I remember it because I still have the poster, and it says it starts June 22nd, and it was a sneak preview. And it was the first time I ever saw the movie and saw it with an audience like yourselves. I was sitting as 3/4 of the way back, and I was in every scene of this thing, and people were reacting in a way I've never experienced. It was out of body. I can never explain what it felt like to be the guy playing the part that was in everybody's consciousness at the moment, in concert at the same time. That's just a privilege and a special feeling. One could only imagine, and I got to imagine. And then after the film was over, everyone heads out onto the street, and all I saw were kids at 10, men at 50, women in their 40s. Everyone was trying to do the crane. And that's when it was like, wow. And that was the moment that was like beyond. This is something I never expected.
I've spent many hours in front of mirrors trying to perfect my crane technique. I promised myself I would not do it on stage tonight.
If anyone's doing it on this stage, it's going to be you.
Fair enough. Let's talk about the Miyagi scene that you referred to, the scene where Daniel's just been humiliated at the country club. He comes to Miyagi's house and finds Miyagi drunk and toasting his deceased wife and child. When I was a kid, I remember finding that scene very difficult to take. I think I fast forward through it sometimes to get to the exciting montage at the end. But now when I watch the movie, it strikes me as an utterly important scene. It's where we really understand the depth of the relationship between Miyagi and Daniel. But as I understand, that was a scene that the producers at one point wanted to excise from the movie to shorten it.
Yes, when that scene, like I mentioned, alluded to before, it was added. They always had a placeholder. They wanted. It was called like the Miyagi backstory scene. So Robert Kamen, the screenwriter, and so that scene sort of came in. If memory serves, I guess about a third of the way through shooting we got those pages, and I remember, shooting that scene was late, and the one thing I always I loved about that scene and the end of that scene. Well, let me back, because I have a good story. Just remind me what I love about the end of the scene.
Got it.
It's fun. I'm like jarring my own memory. But when the film was cut together, the film is long. This film's 2 hours and 6 minutes. Now, by the big tentpole, Batman, Harry Potter standards, I guess it's not long. But for a family film like this, and at the time, the studio was always saying, cut it shorter, until they started doing screenings for you folks, and then they stopped talking because the audience, stayed with it. But that scene, the editor, I think Bud Smith at the time, the director said we should cut, the studio said we should cut this scene. And he said, I think we should, because it stops any forward motion in the third act, which by the book is, once you get to that third act and you're on your hero's shoulders, you take them to curtain. You don't stop for 5 minutes and talk about something from 30 years ago. And but Avildsen fought, and I didn't know of this. I only learned of this after that. They had a campaign for why it's so important, of a motivation and of an understanding for the Miyagi character. Not to mention, as Pat Morita said up until his last days, he called it his Academy Award nomination scene. I think his whole performance was the reason for that. But it is the one you hang the lantern on. And one of my favorite things, like I was telling you before, about that scene, and probably one of my favorite moments in the whole film, is the end of that scene when you see the student then become the mentor. It's almost like that full circle where he was taken care of. Miyagi always took care of Daniel, and in this moment, you see Daniel taking care of Miyagi, and he reads that information and learns more about his friend. And right when we were shooting that, and I'll credit to John Avildsen, although I want to take more credit myself, but this was his, right before, it was like 4 a.m. or whatever, at the end of our shooting day. And he said, when you leave, the scene I just folded the paper and I tuck him in and I just walk out. And he just said, before you walk out, turn and bow to him. And it was just like an off the cuff. And then it just clicked with me what a great note that was. And we did that moment, and then it leads into that beautiful montage and that fantastic Bill Conti music. And it's one of my, I still like a little kid get a little welled up at that point of the film.
I got welled up when I saw it just now, again, as I always do. And I think the other thing that's important about it is that I think, to the film's credit, it doesn't harp on the fact that Daniel is being raised by a single mother. We don't really know what's become of his father. He's just absent. And so to learn, and obviously he sort of has an adopted father in Miyagi,
right.
But to learn that Miyagi has lost a son sort of completes that back and forth as well. And
that relationship, even of Randy Heller, who played the mom, that single mother-son relationship is a great level in this film that, once they went to the sequels, they said, cut the mother, cut the girlfriend, we just need the old man and the kid. And that's the difference between how good the first film was and how, the second one was a worthy sequel, the third one was whatever, we'll move on. But anyway.
Speaking of Randy Heller, I've always, we were backstage, but I heard when Tommy bellowed, "Get him a body bag," the crowd reacted exactly the way I thought it would. But in some ways, the more devastating line in the movie is, "Nice car, Mrs. Larusso." Right. I don't know if that's Tommy or Dutch, but it's just, it brings up another kind of element in the movie, which is a element of class and the different side of the tracks that Daniel comes from Ali and from the Cobra Kai. But the look on Randy Heller's face when the "nice car, Mrs. Larusso" line is uttered is pretty spectacular.
They yell that out to me on the street sometimes. I mean, it's who knew the pop culture elements of this film when we were making it? It's amazing. It's wax on, wax off is part of the American lexicon. It's in the dictionary somewhere. But it's interesting, that and some of the images, and some of those catchphrases that. You could say pretty much anywhere, and everybody knows what it's from, and some people even remember where they saw it. That kind of thing. It's awesome, actually.
So speaking of the pop culture legacy of the movie, let's talk briefly about the Cobra Kai. Billy Zabka.
Yeah. Quintessential badass of the 80s.
The quintessential bad guy from that decade. Is he a jerk when the camera stopped rolling? Were you guys like trading, banana bread recipes, or was he just a jerk in real life?
You want him to be a jerk. He was a pretty good guy. He was certainly an athletic guy, stronger, faster, louder, funny. Not funnier. I was funnier, but everything else. I was as much the athlete as Larusso was, which is one of the appealing things about Daniel Larusso and this film is that he was the every kid. He had no business winning anything, so we all could feel that could be us, and that's part of that sort of innocence that was with him, but in that character. But Zabka was, one day he clocked me. I mean, we had to shut down, cut, send everybody home. We were shooting the skeleton fight, which was, I guess, one big night and then another night to clean up some of the shots. I swore we shot it for 8 weeks straight. I mean, I got, we did all the stuff. I mean, there was no stunts in any of the fight scenes. No stunts in any of the fight scenes. The only only thing that was covered by a stuntman for me was the tumble down the hill with the bike. I did it, but then they were like, that's not too good. Let's get someone to really fly off that thing. I was like, no, I can do it. And when the cars crash and he's running with the shower curtain and he jumps on the cars, I was into doing that too, but they were like, no, we've already shot half the movie. If we lose you now, we're in trouble. But we were doing the skeleton fight, and it was once again like 3 a.m, whatever. And it's when he stands him up and says, hold him. No, before he kicks into the sign. But it's a fake front roundhouse kick. So he fake, and I go here, and then boom, he hit me across the face. And we were rushing, so we were in a wider shot. And then, as they normally do, they'll put either a tighter lens on, or they'll move your mark to be closer. Well, we were going so fast at the time because the sun was coming up that we were moving the lens and the camera and moving my mark, which basically put me about 8 inches closer than everyone's intention was. So the camera was here, and Billy was there, and he faked front round, and just that was the one bad. That was the end of the night. And 2 days later, we went back in.
But other than that, you and
other than that, I'm fine.
So one of the things I've always loved about the movie is how sort of well drawn the different bad guys are, even though they don't get a ton of time. I mean, Johnny gets a good amount of screen time, but the other Cobra Kai don't. But you still kind of have a sense of who Bobby is, who Tommy is. And both Johnny and Bobby sort of have redemption moments at the end. They both kind of feel bad about what they've done. It sort of proves Miyagi's maxim about there not being bad students, only bad teachers.
Right, exactly.
Which I think is a nice moment. But Dutch never seemed to have that moment of redemption. I've always just felt that he was a purely evil individual. I mean, he just a bad guy. And he's played by Chad McQueen, if I'm not mistaken. Is Steve McQueen's son?
It's Steve McQueen's son. Steve McQueen's son, Chad, who's got like the darkest brown hair ever, and they bleached it. So it was like a yellowy, mustardy, yellowy fake hair, and we always joked with him about it. And good, nice guy, but there was no redeeming quality about Dutch.
No. And one thing,
I think he's Kreese's son, illegitimate child.
That's a sequel I would like to see. One thing that I always felt a little cheated about in the movie, and there's one of the only things I don't like about the movie is that in the montage we don't really get to see much of the Dutch-Daniel fight. In fact, that's cut so close that it's not really clear how or why Daniel's prevailed. Do you remember what exactly happened how did you beat him in the end? He just seems so, that first kind of kick that goes like this and then comes back around like that.
Right.
Devastating.
It was his or mine?
That was his.
Oh, really?
To your face, yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you know what? I fast forward through the Dutch parts. At that point, I probably should have caught the end of the film, then I'd have a better answer.
Fair enough. So I think a couple of years ago, you made a very funny, short, humorous video for the site Funny or Die called Wax On, Fuck Off, which if you all have not seen, I just think you should download it immediately when you get home.
It's 4 minutes of fun, I promise you.
Yes,
if you haven't
4
seen
minutes
it.
of a lot of fun. And in that and elsewhere, you've sort of demonstrated a great good humor about the fact that since 1984, you have been the Karate Kid. And I just wanted to ask you about that. What is it like being associated for life with this role? I'm impressed that I would think that for some actors they would resent it at a certain point. They'd want to be able to take a different role, play a different type. But you seem to be at peace with it.
Well, I think the first thing, I'll take this as a two-parter.
Please do.
The wax on, bleep off of it all. I'm just trying to see if there are any little kids out there. All right, fuck it. That was something that came to me as I knew the remake was on its way out, the Jaden Smith, the Jackie Chan remake. And I was in the, so funny. And I was in, I love you guys, my diehards. It's so awesome to have you here. Anyway, and I was trying to sell a show because from behind the scenes, I had a couple of projects that were not going as well as I wanted to, and I knew I could not sit at home and let that movie come out and just be in between jobs. I had to get busy. So there was the whole Sandra Bullock, Jesse James thing, the Tiger Woods stuff, the Charlie Sheen stuff. So that's when it popped into my head that I can't sell these few projects I have, but these guys are all over the screen, that came to mind, the reversed intervention. What is wrong with you? We can't watch you do this to yourself anymore, because you're unsexy, because you're not, because bad behavior is rewarded. So, and the title was just the greatest title in the world. And it was my chance to do everything everybody asked me to do or poke fun of me on my terms. And so that's what led to that. And that thing hit the internet 2 days before the remake and was, just a massive viral hit. And it was a nice embrace from everybody. But and what was the second part of your question that I made a two-parter?
How you kind of made your peace with being Daniel's son for life.
Yeah, I think that's, I would say 10, 15 years ago, I might be giving you an eye roll and maybe said, they could screen the thing, but I'm not going to go there. It's great. I'm glad it, but as you get younger, which I'm trying to do, like I joke, I played 16 for 37 years. You wind up embracing the fact that you have a legacy that connected to the whole world, even and for generations. It reinvents itself for generations, and parents. The remake it felt to me to enhance the legacy of what the 1984 original film was. I mean, I said this in an interview with Good Morning America. I never thought I'd have to chisel the original in my tombstone now, but I never thought that day would come. But it's. Listen, it's a pretty positive role model of a character. It deals with, it doesn't offend anyone except bullies, which we know it's in the, that's in the news constantly anyway. And it's a piece of everyone's childhood. That character, Daniel Larusso maybe not in 200 years, but for us, it's a piece of our upbringing, our childhood, and we connect to that. So the fact that I could still look fondly on that, and as a parent, it's sort of, I consider that a fortunate privilege and just the right place at the right time kind of scenario. And it's not like I haven't been in other things and other, movies that have been successful and or plays or television, but the Karate Kid is like, it's almost like he's Superman. He's like a brand. You know what I mean? So that's, I'll forever have it. I was just producing something on National Geographic Channel, and I have a couple of films out, or anytime I do any press, it's always let off. I mean, when I was off Dancing with the Stars, his Macchio waxes off, is waxed off Dancing with, but it's just like when someone says, hey, wax on, wax off, or whatever, and every one of you think you're the first one to come up with it. you just let it roll. The other alternative is most actors never have the opportunity for anything to hit the screen, let alone touch a generation. So that's the glass half full way of looking at it, and that's the way I choose to look at it as, now. Thank you.
I think we have some roving mics out there, and we're going to take some questions from you all. Raise your hand if you have a question.
What, the whole audience isn't mic'd?
Big fan, love the movie, but surprisingly, the sequel was just as good. And I was always amazed because the first one just sort of ends. You win the tournament, cut to black, credits.
Right.
And the second one picks up literally at that moment. Was that shot for part one, or was that shot for part two?
Great question, and thank you. The second one is a terrific part two to the story, because it takes you to another land and culture, and you get more of Miyagi's backstory. It's fish out of water in reverse. That scene that opens the second film was always at the end of the original Karate Kid screenplay. It was like the couple of days before the holiday break, the Christmas break, and we were over time-wise, and they felt, we pulled the plug on the shooting. They told me go home, and so we never shot, because I remember a debate in the parking lot, literally the parking lot where the punch through the glass and crease his hand and all that live or die man stuff. They were discussing whether we should shoot that scene or call it, because I think they were, beyond the budget and all that stuff. And so that was intended to be what they would call the denouement, which is that last scene of the film. But I think when they cut the movie together and realized they're making another one, they had the perfect opening scene. So that's the long answer to that good question.
Someone else?
You pick them out, because I just get blamed for saying, why didn't he pick me?
Just wait until they get the mic. I'm glad that they cut that scene from the end of the first. I mean, I think the first one ends where it's supposed to end, and that's such a great way of opening up the second movie. You were thrown right back into that world.
Right. Well, because you wanted to see Kreese get his comeuppance.
Right.
And, so that's why a lot of people were disappointed not having that. That's the full circle payoff. But
right.
Okay.
Do we have someone mic'd?
Oh, yep. Hey, hi, Ralph.
Hi.
What about making this film are you most proud of?
That the Larusso character has, and I'm repeating myself, but has touched so many people, and so relatable a character. And I told you before that I felt he was, never was set up to win anything really. But he was the piece of the kid next door in every one of us. So it made you feel that a relatable connection with that character. And I think that was just something that was just the match of the right actor to the right role. I just had that innocence that I think we all got to connect to and feel that could be us, as opposed with so many movies you see, you stand back, and that's a sort of unobtainable type of character, where Larusso really felt like one of us. And I guess that's the thing I'm most proud of, that has stood the test of time.
Back here. And not only does he improbably win the tournament, but he also gets the girl, which is arguably improbable. Is also, Allie with an eye was quite fetching. No offense.
That's right.
It's not so much a question. Could you, I hate to ask it, could you just say, I shot the clerk?
A little my cousin Vinny is. I'm trying to debate whether you're recording this and I'm going to be on the 11 o'clock news. If it's innocent, I could say, I shot the clerk. We went over that switching movie gears, that scene, they made me say that line like 20 times, because one writer was like, it's got to be a question, and the other person said, no, it's got to be an admission. And we went back and forth, and I think they used take 2 of those 20. Anyway, thanks.
Other questions?
It's funny in life. when you grow up and you have problems with bullies, you see them, usually they're from your own town, and you see them over the years. Over the last 28 years, how often have you run into Johnny Lawrence?
That's it's interesting. The first assistant director on this film, Cliff, Cliff Coleman. He always said to me, because he worked on Rocky, he said, people are gonna want to kick your ass all the time when this movie comes out. And I was like, what? Big eyes. And I said, man, I'm just, I learn the lines, I say the words, He said, no, everybody's going to be like, they're going to want to kick your ass. And that never, because he said Stallone, it happened to Stallone all the time. People was like, what do you got? What do you got? And I never confronted that. I think they just felt bad for me because they saw how hideously, nerdy I was. But bullies are, listen, it's a big issue in our society, whether it's obviously the kids at the middle school and the seriousness of that, and there's so many levels to it that it is not a subject to be taken lightly, even in the adult world. But I haven't, outside of my brother and my wife, when I do something stupid, don't really have many confrontations.
Over here.
In addition to sort of it being a story about class and everything, I mean, I think one thing your movie did is touch every kid who has a funny sounding last name, and give us hope that, okay, we have to spell it once or twice, and for our teachers and the other people in the class laugh at us because all the Mr. Lawrences out there have it easy. And I want to know if you had a sense when you were doing this movie that it's also sort of an immigrant story, and that not just Mr. Miyagi's from another place, but it's about a kid who comes from an environment, he's, I guess, an Italian kid from Newark who's coming in and hanging out with the Wasps. And I think that sort of lingered a lot longer for a lot of people. I don't know if you got the sense of that when you were making the film, that it had that element.
Well, it's like what was Randy Heller's line, it looks like the whole world turned blonde. I think that, it's, Daniel Larusso in the original script was Daniel Weber. That's a little bit of trivia most people don't know. And I played this role in Eight Is Enough, Jeremy Andretti. He was like Jeremy, Smith till I walked in the room. But Larusso was Daniel Weber, and so all of a sudden he's ethnic New York Italian, and Miyagi is obviously I'm trying to think back whether that resonated for me, and I really thought about that. But there was certainly the social class difference. There's certainly the East Coast versus the West Coast. The Encino versus Reseda. I mean, even Reseda. Reseda's like more popular than ever since this movie. Why don't you go back to Reseda? I'll hear that like if I steal somebody's seat in a restaurant. I'm sorry, it was empty.
That's tough. One of the things about the move to the West Coast that I don't think I noticed until about my 200th viewing, but I thought was interesting, is that Randy Heller's character says she's going to take this job in computers, but then when we actually see her on the job, she seems to be working as a waitress or a hostess maybe at a restaurant who's hoping to become a manager, and the movie sort of doesn't highlight it at all, but the computer thing does not seem to have panned out, and I think that's an interesting corollary to the class stuff. Both of the characters have come west for seeking economic opportunity, and they don't find it or they don't find what they thought they were going to find.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I should bring Robert Kamen, the writer, up to answer those deep questions.
Well, one other thing from that scene where we see her and Daniel having a conversation at the restaurant where she works, that's got to be one of my favorite scenes when they're having the conversation across the table, and in the background and through the window, you see the entire Cobra Kai plot unfold.
Right.
And I don't think I saw that until my 20th or 21st
They're
viewing.
running back in the door doing the big acting in the window, because I remember the director saying, "We can't see you enough," and then run back, and and all that dialogue with talking about the girl, and look when the mom takes off and Larusso's going on and on about, I don't know, that was all. That on the day Avildsen was giving me, he said, why don't you just keep talking about her? And that was one of the first scenes that was probably shot in the first week. The first scenes we shot were on the beach with the soccer ball and getting beat up at night, the first night or whatever, beating number one. But that restaurant scene, when that came back, that scene where I'm, with the French fry and talking about, I think she's hot, whatever it was. That was the first day that everyone came up to me and from the producers and the people at Columbia Pictures, and they were just like, "This is, the rushes or the dailies, the next, they saw all the film from that day before, and they just commented on how this character was coming across and how good it was and how relatable and real he was coming across, and so, that stuff was not always in the script, but made its way. And lifted the level of what the end result was the final performance. So it's pretty cool.
I always loved that ad lib, and I did not know it was an ad lib, but when you say she's something else, it's great.
Right.
She buries Judy.
Buries Judy.
Another question?
Buries Judy? Now you're taking me way back.
In the front row in the back?
Hi. Oh God, I'm nervous. I'm a really big fan, just throwing it out there. But
Thank
I was
you.
just wondering if, what movie you liked better, The Outsiders or Karate Kid?
That's a tough question. Because I often get asked what's the favorite one you've been in, and I just usually name one that never got it to the screen or died on the first day. But The Outsiders holds a really special place for me, because that was I read that book when I was 12. I think it was the first book I finished without my parents screaming, "Finish the book!" I think that. So I got to be in the book that I read when I was a kid. I got to play the part that I want. Everybody wanted to be a greaser. Everybody and every actor in the country wanted to be in that movie. So the fact that happened for me, and working with that incredible cast that we were all just starting out, and Francis Ford Coppola as the director, that's one of my favorite roles and performances I've ever done. So it really holds a special place as my first big breakthrough role and a dream come true. But what the Karate Kid and what Daniel Larusso has done, it's tough. Daniel Larusso is closer to me than Johnny Cade, but it's a tough call. I'm just glad I'm in both of them.
The Outsiders has one of the greatest casts ever assembled, but the movie that you're going to be in later this year, Hitchcock, also has an amazing cast. You want to talk a little bit about that project?
Yeah, I'm excited about this film. I mean, I don't have a big role in it, so if you're all running, you're going to see Macchio for 2 hours. No. But it's, as an actor's career goes through cycles and ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys and ups and downs and all of the above. And, there are those times where you want something and you get something, and it turns out to be with a company and a group of people that only enhance the experience, or that you're privileged to be in the company of. In this film, I play Joe Stefano, who wrote the screenplay for Psycho, and this film is called Hitchcock, and it stars Sir Anthony Hopkins as Alfred Hitchcock. He's got all the prosthetic makeup, fast suit. He's just incredible. Helen Mirren, Scarlett Johansson, Jessica Biel, Toni Collette. It's just this phenomenal cast, and it's all about Hitchcock's life during the making of Psycho. There's no footage of him actually directing the movie. It's all what was going on in his life and in his marriage and his infatuation with his co-stars, and the fact that he had to finance the film himself. And it juxtaposes the story of Ed Gein, who is the serial killer that the original movie Psycho was based on. So it's really a smart script, and so it was a big win for me getting that part. But if you sneeze or fall asleep for too long, I may have to kick you. You might miss my stuff. No, it's a great ensemble to be involved with. So thanks for bringing that up.
I'm looking forward to it. Another question?
We have time for 2 more questions.
2 more questions.
I'm going to get the way in the back person here.
So you're talking earlier about the ad-libbing in the diner scene. I was just wondering, as I was watching the movie, that there are a lot of the scenes that are naturalistic kind of dialogue. How much of the script was written that way, or how much of it was your ad-libbing?
That's a good question. I mean, the script was, we were true to the script, and Robert Kamen wrote a fantastic script and a beautiful relationship between the Miyagi Daniel characters and all that delivered on. I think there were a decent amount of ad libs in the school, the teenage scenes, and Avildsen was always throwing stuff out, and I would play around with things. But the main Miyagi scenes, the meat and potatoes of the movie, was pretty true to the script. Occasionally, stuff would happen in rehearsals. And there's also a decent amount of these rehearsal tapes that are on YouTube as well. Avildsen shot, like I mentioned earlier, always had a camera on all the time. And we rehearsed so much, which is often not the case these days, but we spent a couple of weeks rehearsing as I was, learning the karate and trying to get in whatever feeble shape I needed to be in. But those scenes, like the payoff, what I call the big payoff scene, when he's like, show me wax on, we do, and everyone in the audience, we all realized that all those chores paid off. That scene was what it was on the page. And we just rehearsed, certainly all the physical stuff. And Avildsen had us rehearsing that, he said, you can't be fast enough, can't be sharp enough. And the drunk scene, that was it was pretty strong on the for what was on the page. So there's a little of both, basically.
Was Take a Worm for a Walk Week in the script?
I think I promise you. Well, I guess I should have Rob come here and talk about that. But I think it was. You cannot say that unless somebody wrote it for you. Zapko actually yelled that out at me. And anytime I see him, he's like, take a worm for a walk week. Just like, and I haven't seen him in 3 years, and it's,
It's one of the most bizarre lines of dialogue in any movie I've ever seen. Last question.
Hi, Ralph.
Hi.
What similarities do you see between you and Daniel Larusso?
Good question. I think the similarities is there's a little cocky confidence that Larusso has that he's got nothing to back it up with. That's very me. I would always, I'd be the one to throw out the sarcastic line or to be a little defiant. I think if someone punched me, I would not go back where he did. I think I would figure out a way to not run into it again, and he pushed further than I would have. But I think the similarity as well was, his earnest innocence, even amid that sort of cocky, confidence, and he didn't. It was, and this is how I was as a kid, because I was so green. I was always like 3 years behind what everybody else was doing. I'm still kind of that way, but I think, he altruistically had a very openness about him, even though he had a little bit of that East Coast bravado. And I think I had that, at that time as well. And that's why, if you look at that audition tape that's on YouTube, I don't know what the channel is, but search it out. I think you can find it. You'll see that was my first cold reading. I mean, I never, I just thumbed through the script once, and I was meeting the director and with the script and just doing it cold. And when you see that, it's not that far from what made it to the final cut of the film. And I think in that you see that character already. So there's a big part of me in him, but I'm a little bit smarter.
Ralph, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, thank you, man.
Thank you all for coming.
This is a joy for me, folks. Thank you so much. Very cool.